Good old Mega Man. I wish I could take this on the go. Ooh, what's this? When it comes to mobile gaming, porting more traditional games to the platform can be a difficult proposition. Sometimes you get high quality conversions like the Sonic games from Christian Whitehead and Sega, while in other instances, you get stuff like Super Mario Run, original games designed for the platform. Now these types of games work well enough on mobile and look great while doing so. Capcom, on the other hand, doesn't exactly have the best track record here. Resident Evil 4, which had its own mangled port to the mobile platforms with horrible visuals and control, while at the same time Mega Man X was released in this state with interesting artistic changes and a very low frame rate. These types of releases just don't work very well and feel rather cheaply made overall, which they likely were. Now, all the way back in 2009, Capcom also released this for the iPhone 3G and 3GS, a port of Mega Man 2 by Beeline Interactive. Now, this controlled pretty poorly, but it at least seemed to run smooth enough, especially considering the hardware at the time. But it's now 7 years later, more than that in fact, and Capcom has taken a second crack at releasing Mega Man on smartphones. This time, all 6 NES games have been released on iOS and Android, and you know what? It's a lot worse than the 2009 effort. Welcome to Mega Man Mobile. This is a very bad version of Mega Man. There's really no getting around it here. Right out of the gate, it's clear that something is seriously wrong here with the game's performance. We're looking at Mega Man 3 here, and by default, the game runs like this. Yeah, it's 15 frames per second, even with occasional frame persistence interruptions along the way. And man, it feels terrible. I mean, this is what you would expect from a mid-80s port of an NES game to the IBM PC, before the PC was capable of handling scrolling smoothly. This just isn't smooth at all, and it's certainly not how I want to replay Mega Man 3. It's difficult to understand the logic in releasing these games looking like this. I mean, just bundling up some ROM files would have yielded better results than this. So in order to capture this then, I was able to run HDMI out from one of my iPads, and I'm playing it on there. And yeah, it's technically playable, I suppose. I mean, I am playing the game. It just doesn't feel good at all. And despite all those pixels in an iPad screen, they just went ahead and did a 1:1 pixel scale, so you end up with sort of a narrow looking game, rather than the actual 4:3 aspect ratio. But then again, it's hardly worth complaining about in comparison to all the other issues here. And in comparison, by the way, here's Mega Man 3 running on real NES hardware. Yes, I'm using the high-def NES mod here in order to get a crisp output, but this is otherwise stock NES hardware through and through. It's what Mega Man 3 is supposed to look like. It's fast, it's responsive, and it runs at 60 frames per second. Okay, sure, it can have some slowdown from time to time, yeah, but the overall experience is smooth and exactly what you want out of Mega Man. But come on, look at this mobile port. This just doesn't compare at all. But get this, there is actually something in the options menu called High Mode, which, when you enable it, does this. Game speed is increased, and it bumps the performance up to a whopping 20 frames per second. Yeah, still a full third of the original game's frame rate, but, well, I guess it's better. Well, at least in terms of the number of frames on screen. I mean, with the fiddly controls here and the higher speed gameplay, it actually kind of plays even worse. But this isn't even the only thing wrong with the port. Sound quality isn't entirely accurate here for one thing, and the scaling is poor on certain platforms. It's nice and clean in an iPad at least, but on the 1080p native iPhone Plus phones, the scaling isn't especially good and there are noticeable artifacts as the game scrolls. It's a little bit tricky to see here, but you know, this is kind of what it looks like. And of course, that doesn't even touch on the controls here. Buttons cannot be moved around or resized like some games, and the default placement and spacing isn't really all that great. Of course, when you translate an NES game to an iPhone, well, you're not really expecting amazing controls here, but the fact that these are the least of this game's problem is kind of telling. Now at this point we've really only been looking at Mega Man 3, but I tested out some of the other ones such as Mega Man 6 here, and well, they're every bit as bad as what you saw in Mega Man 3. In fact, in Mega Man 6 here, they actually stripped out the very cool parallax scrolling layer that was present in this stage and was a pretty cool achievement for the NES. What's extra insulting about all this is that Capcom released the Legacy Collection last year for actual consoles. It wasn't flawless, mind you, but it was a pretty great way to enjoy Mega Man. The 3DS version was especially enjoyable on the go and offers better image quality than what you get with the Virtual Console. So what happened here then? Well, one theory I have is that these were actually ported from one of the many mobile iterations of the game. Here's one such version in action, and as you can see, the performance is actually pretty similar. So that might account for it, though it is kind of a mystery as to why this method would have been selecting rather than just bog standard emulation, which would really work better here. Ultimately, it's not entirely clear why Capcom released the games in this state, as it doesn't really showcase Mega Man in a positive light at all. It really shouldn't have been released like this. And of course, the reviews on the App Store are rather low, and only serve to further tarnish the name. So if you're ever tempted to check out one of these ports, just stop and don't do it. There are far better games to play on your phone than this, and certainly better ways to play Mega Man. If you really want to play Mega Man on the go, then definitely check out the collection for 3DS. Of course, Virtual Console works as well, and you can download the PlayStation Network versions if you're using a Vita. While none of these versions are quite perfect, they are all so much better than this port. Anyways, if you found this consumer alert useful, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter, and I'll continue to keep an eye out for any other bad ports like this, as they're always interesting to look at. There is a certain Tiger game coming along soon that has caught my interest after all. But until next time, this is John signing off.